Welcome to the Delicious Recap Family Matters. I'm Jon Francois. Who are you?
I am Ajay Vandertunt.
Is there a specific character you are in this episode, or are you just genuinely your lovely, authentic self?
I'm going to be genuinely my lovely, authentic self because we talked to some authentically lovely people today.
Yes. Ceej and TC from Bruh Meets World. I had to take a moment because, there's just something about the, rhyming relatability of their names where it's like, wait a minute, is it Ceej TJ, TJ TC? Ceej and TC from Bruh Meets World, they do the most fantastic Boy Meets World fan cast from a melanin point of view, just like we're doing a Family Matters podcast from a melanin point of view. The only difference is that, they are obviously a million steps ahead of us because they're doing a white show and we're Black people doing an already Black show. Ceej and TC have been doing this podcast for almost as long as Boy Meets World was on the air, 7 years. So we talk about that. Of course, we talk about their famous collaboration with the Pod Meets World people, Danielle Fishel, Ryder Strong, Will Friedle, who were actually in Boy Meets World. The fact that, Pod Meets World and Bruh Meets World were able to come together and collaborate, that is something that we definitely talk about. And anything else that we talk about?
We just had some great candid moments to see how this experience has worked with them and changed them and what they discovered about themselves. So it's just all around a good little ball of fun.
There you go. So let's roll in this ball, shall we? TC and Ceej from Bruh Meets World right now. All right, we got the entire gang here.
Exactly. Look at this. 4 Black men all podding.
Potted up.
Four black men who are all appropriately late. We're just living up to our creed.
And my Zoom was up. That's me.
Jon, I'm late for everything.
Oh, yeah. I was 45 minutes late to work today. I just, so ever since moving into my new home with my wife, every issue you would expect from a 124-year-old home is happening. So I was dealing with that. And then the weather.
So it's haunted, essentially.
It is essentially haunted. Yeah. That. And also, I'm here in Vermont, so the weather's not exactly driving friendly today. So I just said to my bosses, I was just like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to be an hour late today and you can suck it.
Vermont. That's cold.
Yeah. So we did this with one of our last guests, Jacques Bolton. He's also in California, but he's in Pasadena. What part of California are you guys from?
I'm in the hills.
Oh, I'm in the Sherman Oaks area.
Got it. So I'm going to ask the same stereotypical temperature question. What's the temperature like right now in Cali for both you guys?
Ooh, that's a good question. Let's see. What is it? Because it was cold. It was 41 when I woke up, but I don't know if it's still that way.
That's basically springtime here.
No. It's 66 now where I'm at.
Andrew, what's the temperature you got in your area?
It just hit 32.
Okay.
So I'm not liking this. I am missing Texas every day. Yes.
Where are you
at?
I'm
missing Texas.
So Andrew's currently in Rochester, New York, but yeah, like you said, you're in Texas. So to you, 35 is murderous, but here in Vermont, where any day it could be 8 or 0, 35 is pretty damn warm. I know, but it is more of a positive than a negative to have a thick skin for these kind of temperatures.
We're both from Florida, and honestly, anything below 60 is winter. So LA has not been living up to its bargain.
Also, LA cold is different. LA cold, it's I tried to explain this to people who live in I have a lot of family in New Jersey and New York and Philadelphia, that kind of area. And when I tell them, I'm like, hey, 40 degrees here is I need a full parka. I need to have underoos. I need the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think the climate is a big thing. I feel like if I were in LA for even a few months, I probably would have the same thing where 40 degrees would seem like 10 degrees in my skin. So I think the different climate between West and East has a lot to do with it. Yeah,
absolutely.
Right. The humidity of Florida, I used to be really used to, and after a while, I lost that.
Right. But hey, alas, regardless of temperature and coast, here we are. We are unified in our Black American experience, if that makes sense. I have no idea. I'm trying to segue into something, but it's not working out. You guys obviously, Bruh Meets World, wonderful Boy Meets World fan cast that you've been doing for nearly 7 years. Let's start from the beginning. Either of you can decide who wants to go, whether it's Ceej or TC. Let's just go way back to how you two first met.
So our story, I'll go since he's still connecting. But our story is we met in high school, honestly. We were one of very few people of color in the school, let alone in our classes. And so we knew each other. We really bonded over our love of television. TC used to have a Batman car that has the exact same logo of Batman that I have on my wrist. So, and then we just kind of like kept in touch. Just be like, hey, did you check out this? Did you check out that? And when podcasting became a thing, I went to TC and I was like, this is basically what we've been doing for years. We just didn't have a name for it. Very much like our ADHD diagnosis. It's like, this is just how we've been. And we didn't have a word for it. But once we found out about it, we were like, oh yeah, this sounds like us. Same thing with podcasting.
And as someone with undiagnosed ADHD, I kind of get what you're saying. TC, are you the major Batman fan? Are you the one?
Like, I know Ceej is actually probably a bigger fan than I am, but I just love pop culture. I think that was the thing that, like, I was obsessed with pop culture. I just always thought the Batmobile was the coolest car, more than it being a Batman thing. It was just more of like the cars of movies that I was in love with, like the DeLorean from Back to the Future. It's just this obsession with just these kind of pop culture references more than Batman itself. But I do run deep. I love Batman. I love Batman the animated series. This, me and Ceej talk about this stuff all the time.
Okay, and that's awesome. And now, Andrew, you can. I want you to chime in on this afterwards if you have any love for Batman. I think I still own all 4 volumes of Batman the Animated Series on DVD back in Connecticut, where I'm originally from. So when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, like another thing that I have in common with these guys. It's awesome. Andrew, are you like a big fan of Batman at all?
I am. I'm a fan of Batman. I am like a Poison Ivy stan, so she could just do anything for me and I'm in heaven. Have you guys seen the anime Batman where the Joker's part of the Yakuza?
Oh, the anime. I haven't seen the anime Batman. No. I thought you were talking about Harley Quinn, the animated series, because that's what I was going to bring up if you're a huge Poison Ivy fan.
Harley Quinn's my second best. We are bosom buddies.
I love that. Another question I wanted to ask, when did you two first discover podcasting? For me, it was 2011, but I didn't get the courage to get into it until like 2020.
When would you say? Like,
I was gonna say, so discover podcasting is
like when did you first find out? Oh, podcasting is a thing, and you started listening to it before you got into it yourselves?
I'll say that Serial was the very first like major thing where I remember everyone was on it, everyone was about it, and then that got me into the format of being like, oh, I like this. It's something I could do. I lived in New York at the time, so something I could listen to on my way to the gym or on the subway on my way to work. And then I just kind of fell in love with it, and it took a few years before it dawned on me that I could participate. But yeah.
For me, I think it was probably around 2014, 2015. I was listening to a show called How Did This Get Made, which is a podcast hosted by Paul Scheer, Jason Mantzoukas, and June Raphael from, what's that show on Netflix? Anyways, the 3 of them host a show where they just kind of review terrible movies and they just talk about like what was so bad about it. And it still runs to this day. It's one of my favorite podcasts, but it was one of the first ones I found. And then as I started listening to more, I was like, wow, this is kind of how me and CJ talk. Maybe this is something that we can do. So from there, it just kind of sprouted.
Andrew, what about you?
Podcasting for me, 2016 is around time I got into it, because I thought podcasting was something like NASA did in the beginning. I was like, people were like, I like this podcast, and I'm like, okay, I don't know about space, so I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, because you have the spaceships, the pods. I get what you're saying. Yeah, Serial 2014. A lot of people say that Serial is what got like a lot of people into podcasting. I remember I was in a temp job like in between college semesters back in 2011. I think the first podcast I might have listened to was the Adam Carolla Show, and then that sort of segued into like some radio drama kind of podcasts. Like there was like an old timey Batman radio drama podcast that I listened to. But Ceej and TC, you can tell me about, technically, did you guys think that podcasting was just a thing that was just impossible to figure out? Because that was me in 2011. I was just like, how the fuck do you produce this audio to get it out there into the space where the entire world, not just like a radio listening local territory, but entire world can hear it? Like, and I think this must have been years before like Spotify for podcasters, all these podcast hosting platforms came in. So were you guys like that as well, where you're just like, wait, what? Like how can we record audio and have it go out for the world to hear?
Anyone who has listened to our earlier episodes know that we did not let bad quality limit us. We were very much just like once we decided we wanted to do it, we immediately were like, all right, we'll record an episode. And the first time we uploaded our episode was actually on Spotify, not Spotify, SoundCloud. And that was how we did it. We were like, I guess we'll just do SoundCloud and then we'll take the RSS feed and give it to all of these different platforms. Like we did it like really manual the first couple of episodes, and then we found other pod servers and we were able to like make it easier on ourselves. But even to this day, we find out and we're like, oh wait, you could do that easier? We've been doing it the hard way for years. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, Andrew, chime in on this. I mean, it was for me. Like once I discovered Anchor, now Spotify for podcasters, it was just like mind blowing. I just put a piece of audio here, and then they just do all the other work for me as far as national distribution. What the heck?
It was the easiest thing ever. That's how I got started, using the Anchor app and then podcasters for Spotify. And I will never look back, because that was my hardest experience doing my first episode and all by myself. I was gonna die.
Yeah,
one of the bigger challenges we had too was just that we weren't living in the same area when we first started. So way back then, we had to figure out, how do we do this not in the same room, which now seems like a very easy challenge to overcome, but at the time was like a huge deal for us to try to figure out the mechanics of.
Yeah. Now, of course, let's get into the role that Boy Meets World plays in each of your lives. I mean, can you talk about just all of that? Like what role did it play in your childhood, and how did it get you two to bond the way you do in this podcast?
I would say that there's a few shows that define my childhood, or our childhoods, I would say, as much as Boy Meets World. Probably Fresh Prince is up there, Living Single. Like there's a few other ones, but Boy Meets World was just definitely one of those shows that we always enjoyed. And when we were first figuring out what we wanted to do for podcasts, we just started talking about kind of nostalgia stuff from the 90s. We started talking about Nickelodeon stuff for a while. Nothing really clicked. And then we talked about one episode of Boy Meets World, specifically there. And then there was Sean episode, which is a montage to the movie Scream. It's pretty famous, like Halloween episode. And we talked about that one episode, and we were so excited to have that conversation. We were so excited to talk about the world of Boy Meets World and what it meant to us and all the lessons. And it was almost like through that conversation, we realized how important the show was to us. And it really inspired us to just, hey, let's just talk about the whole thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, the coming of ageness of the show is what really got me into it back in the day. I would always do these like imaginary TV shows in my bedroom before I was confident enough to do the thing in the public. And I think like at one point I had like a Boy Meets World, Sister, Dragon Ball Z mashup show going on. When you think pop culture that resonates with the Black community, stereotypically, we don't think of Boy Meets World like first in our mind. So I wonder if, because of that, you guys maybe felt like you had to hide your fandom, or did you surprisingly find a lot of, fellow people in the Black community that were into Boy Meets World as well?
Neither, actually. It's like what happened with us was that we just put it out because that's what we wanted to talk about. Like in reality, like when you look at our earlier episodes and even like our whole tagline, it's like Boy Meets World Fancast with a melanin point of view. Our whole thing was we were Black children who attached ourselves to this white show. And we were like, what was it about this show that we connected with? Like, we thought it was weird. We thought it was like out of the loop. Because like you said, we had Sister Sister, we had Fresh Prince, we had Living Single. All of these shows were really important to us. But Boy Meets World also penetrated itself into one of the shows that was foundational in like the people we became. So we just wanted to have that conversation. And in all honesty, I say this all the time, we did not know and did not think anyone was listening. We just put it out there. We were like, I guess, but we started this as a project really for ourselves. And we were like, we want to start something and finish it, like from beginning to end. That was the goal. And I got to tell you, if it was not for that goal, I think we would have quit a long time ago. But we were just like, you just got to keep doing it, because that's the true goal of this, to start a project and see it through to the end. And in doing so, no matter how long it took us to do that, it gained traction, it gained attention, it gained the attention of the original cast. And like, it's been like over time that it's grown. And since then, we've had many fans say to us, I also really attached myself to this. I also was a person of color who related to Boy Meets World, and we appreciate your voice because nobody else, like, I didn't have anyone else to talk to about this. No one else was like checking for me when I would talk for Boy Meets World. But now I think because of us and because of other rewatch shows, a lot of people are very comfortable being like, oh yeah, I fucks with Corey. I don't know if I can curse, but anyway.
No. If you listen to Andrew and I's podcast, we curse plenty. And I've heard that. So cursing is encouraged, not only allowed, but encouraged.
Yeah.
Andrew, I know that we have family matters in common. And I know, Andrew, you had talked about growing up and watching the TGIF ABC block with your family. Was Boy Meets World a part of that family viewing experience?
Boy Meets World wasn't a part of the family experience. It was always just me and my brother. My parents were like, this one isn't for us. But we were obsessed with it because it just felt so good to watch. And listening to you guys talk about it, I hear how you have that connection of, we got funny moments, we got good moments, but we got these moments where maybe you were afraid to talk to your parents about something and the show brought it up for you. Was that something that really made it like stick for both of you?
For me, it was actually a show I used to watch with my mom. So, a lot of the conversations that were brought up, and I'll say I was maybe a few years younger than Corey and them. Like I was around their age, but still a little younger. So when, some of the more serious conversations get brought up when there's like a girl gets abused by her dad in one episode in season 4. I remember specifically watching that episode with my mom and then us having a conversation about it afterwards. So it was actually kind of a bridge for me more than a discovery in a lot of ways for these conversations.
And for me, I grew up a latchkey kid. So like I watched a lot of this stuff just by myself. And I was also someone who moved around a lot. So I was always curious. I always had a curiosity about the world around me and about how people connected with other people and the stories that connected other people. So Boy Meets World honestly was just something that I connected to because I felt like Corey in the sense of always trying to like feel cool and my hair didn't move like everyone else's. Like that was what I connected to. And in doing so, I saw, a relationship that I could relate to. I saw two boys be friends in a way that I could relate to and want it for myself. So in reality, I came just kind of looking for the Feeny lessons, which is what we talk about in our podcast. The little one-offs from Bill Daniels where he would give a life lesson. Like those were really important to me. But as you said, as I grew, they grew. And it just kind of became this roadmap of like what to look out for in the road ahead.
Going back to the hair, I had so many moments back in middle school, maybe early high school in the 2000s, where I just imagined in front of the mirror that I had the Sean Hunter hair, the big chair. Going back to relating to Corey, like that was a character that spoke to me because, you feel like this outcast, you want to be a part of something. And actually, you know what, that leads me to another. And so what was Corey the character that you guys related to the most in the show? Was it Sean? Like what was there a particular character that spoke to you guys a lot?
Okay. I want to answer this question, but first, can I just say to the hair comment that you just made, Marquise Houston made me think that Black people could do this. Marquise Houston, it made me think that I could have the Sean Hunter hair as an a black kid, and it just wasn't true. My hair didn't do it. I probably destroyed my hair trying to make it do it, and I go home, Roger.
Can I tell you, I think it was 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to interview Marcus Houston. And it was for like some show that he was promoting on like Tubi. I don't know. But either way, I was like, fuck it. I'm going to talk to you about the Immature and the Sister days. I absolutely asked about the hair. He didn't give a Boy Meets World response, unfortunately, but yeah, he actually brought about something that I forgot about, which was like LA West Coast gangster rap style. Like Immature, those guys with the perms, they were going off of that. So yeah, I mean, you know, when Marcus went, I guess in the same style that I have, it was just like, well, you know, what the heck, what happens? And that's just, I guess that was just the 2000s, just going to the, you know, the haircuts like that, you know, have the good sort of lineup and the fade and whatnot. So Andrew, I don't know if you, did you also wanted to have white people flowy hair back in the day, or were you fine with?
Okay, so I just have to share it. I actually permed my hair just so I could have a good like little cowlick slick back, and I dyed it red. And I had a blast. You couldn't tell me nothing. And then after that, my hair started to fall out, and I'm never again.
Ooh,
fuck, damn. Find out.
I had it for a week. It was cute, and then it was done.
So sorry, back to the question. What character were you guys the most?
To answer your original question, you know what's interesting, especially during this rewatch, I'm finding that I have related to almost every single character in the show at one point in time. And I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but it's, you know, every now and then we get an episode that focuses more on Eric or focuses more on Sean. And I'm just like, wow, you know, I grew up undiagnosed with ADHD. So there's parts of Eric's struggle in school that I can really relate to. I grew up with like issues with my dad. So, you know, Sean's family issues were something that I could relate to. And then like me and Corey have identical hair. So we can, you know, find common ground there. This is when we met Ben Savage. The first thing he was talking to me about was like, hey, what do you do to like get your hair? He was like asking me for hair advice. I'm like, Corey, we're in the same position here. I can't help you.
Now, and I remember hearing this on either your podcast or one of your Pod Meets World appearances. Can you talk about running into Ben Savage? I think it was Santa Monica that you mentioned that you ran into him. Like, how did that happen?
Oh, okay. So I know what you're talking about. You're talking about a while ago. I used to live in Santa Monica, and I knew he was there. Like I did not run into him, but I was like, he's here. He's in the presence. But later on, we went to a fundraiser for the Hollywood strikes. And while we were there, we literally went there to support the writers that we've like met and known. And while there, Mark Blutman, who's one of the writers, was like, oh, you know, Ben's going to be here. And like, I promise you, TC just like short circuited. Like I was like, but I was like, all right, we're going to do this. We met him. I'll let him tell like the story because as nervous as he was, he did end up like having a full on conversation with Ben. And yeah, it was.
And yeah, I was kind of nervous to talk to him because, you know, publicly it seems he's really tried to, you know, step away from the Boy Meets World era of his life to focus more on like politics or other things. So he doesn't really do interviews. He doesn't do anything like that. So I didn't know if he would think of us as like press and try to like stay away from us. But the moment he met us and found out that we were obsessed with Boy Meets World, he was like way interested to talk to us. I don't know if he was like, isn't it weird that these two black kids love Boy Meets World or whatever, but he just wanted to talk to us about what we loved about the show. And like, I ended up talking to this dude for like a half hour. He talked to me about my mom. Like I met his wife. He was just like a really nice guy. And he actually didn't have issues talking about Boy Meets World the way I thought he would. But, you know, at a certain point, you know, he was there, you know, a few of the Boy Meets World producers were there, and they were just kind of in this circle talking about Boy Meets World stories from like backstage. And I'm somehow just there ears listening to them reminisce about the show, and it was one of those nights where I was like, you know what, CJ was right. It was so worth it to move to LA because this would not happen anywhere else.
Can I ask what led you guys to move to LA? Was it just to get close to people that you could, you know, get on your podcast? Was it for those networking purposes, or was it just for other reasons?
I moved because of the weather. I lived in New York, and I was like, I'm not doing another winter. That's it. Everyone asked, like, what made you move to LA? And I got off a plane once. It had just been a nor'easter in New York. And I was like, my brain said never again. So I went home that afternoon, told my roommate, hey, I'm moving to LA at the end of this year. If you want to join, that's cool. If you don't, that's where I'll be. And so I just moved out here, really with no plan other than to get away from the weather. And Tony had his own journey.
Yeah. Ceej was out there before I was. And then I was like dating a girl who lived here. So I moved out here to be with her. And now I'm just out here because I fell in love with it. So, yeah, California living. It's suiting us.
Andrew, didn't you mention that like once you like finish your work in dentistry that you wanted to move out west as well?
I do. I want to move out west. I want to hit like Seattle, or I want to go back to Hawaii. Those are the places that I want to go.
Oh, so you were in Hawaii previously?
Yeah, I'm a military brat and I was born there and then moved back a few times with family. And I love it. The transition to traveling on is amazing, but I can't do the cold anymore. It hurts to get up in the morning.
If you can't do the cold, then I don't know if Seattle. That's why I was like, all right, if you're from Hawaii, then yeah, I would go something a little bit warmer.
I'm thinking warmer. I just love the rain. So I was like, oh, it rains in Seattle every day. But then I'm like, yeah, I'm getting old and that is not for me anymore.
All right. So as a fellow podcaster who just gets into the nitty gritty of it, I mean, I'm going to nerd out. I like knowing about your process. So I want you to take me back to 2017, like leading up to the launch of this podcast. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? And the lead up to launching the very first episode of Bruh Meets World. Because I listened to, I think, the season 1 premiere recap, the season 2 premiere recap, the season 3 premiere recap, because I was just so fascinated by the progression of you guys season after season after season. So what was it all like, just mentally, physically, everything back in 2017 when you were trying to get this idea off the ground?
Again, in 2017, as Tony said, we knew that we wanted to do a podcast, and we have so many, I'll call them not even failed pilots, but just pilots that we had done, and we had this isn't quite working. And then once we got the Boy Meets World, as he said, we had done that one episode, and we were like, this is good. This is us being natural and having conversations and doing it in a way that you and I would have a conversation, and not necessarily like this structured thing that felt like we were reading a script. So we did that, and in all honesty, I don't know about Tony, but I don't think we thought too much about it. I think it was a rewatch podcast. So you start with one episode, you follow it through, you give your commentary. And again, we were just having conversations with each other. And I really didn't think much more about it other than, again, this is a hobby. This is a project. This was kind of like a mission to follow through. That's all it was. If you ask me anything, did you ever think it would be? Nope. Never thought it would be anything other than a project I started and held myself accountable to. And then as we started to get people interacting with us on socials, we'd be like, oh, I think people are listening to us, maybe we should be doing it. And then as we grew, podcasting itself grew. And so, as you were saying, season over season, by the time we'd get to the end of a season, the podcasting world had become different, and we would respond accordingly. I'll say the barrier of entry opened up, the ability to get on Podbean and then Anchor, and all of these things happened. And as technology progressed, so did our audience, so did our style, and we just got more comfortable. But yeah, in 2017, it was just record an episode with my friend, put it on SoundCloud, and let's just keep having these conversations.
And can I add something to that? I just want to say that when we first started, which was really interesting, if you listen to our pilot episode, structurally, it's not actually that different than our new episodes. For whatever reason, we found a flow that worked pretty early on. We got lucky in that way that, most of our major segments, like we end every episode with like hey, what would you grade this episode? What's the major lesson from this episode? What didn't age very well? These are conversations we've had at the end of every single episode. So it's really added some consistency, which is great. But in terms of evolution, like, we used to record this on like GarageBand, I think. Like, it was just like an audio file. I mean, the major switch for us happened between seasons 4 and 5 when I was like, hey, maybe we should think about doing video podcasting. And so that just added a whole nother level to the production of what needed to be done. It took a while to like get in the swing of being able to get a whole video done in a week. Like, it just kind of took a while for us to find our legs, but once we did, we kind of found the groove that works for us now.
So what's the specific prep process like going into each episode recap? Are you guys watching an episode together and then kind of trying to build off a conversation on that? Do you watch the episode separately, take notes separately, and then try to convene together on that? Like, what's your process?
So I always thought that one of the really fun parts of the show is TC knows Boy Meets World kind of like a book, like he's read over and over again. He knows storylines, he knows episodes. I grew up on it and it was really important to me, but I hadn't seen it in years. So I think that having like the Boy Meets World expert who knew what was going on, and then me who was just kind of like revisiting it for the very first time, was always fun for us. So we usually watched things separately and then would just come to the table, because a lot of it is not wanting to know what the other person thinks about the episode until we get on mic. And then once we have that conversation, like we just recorded and we were like fighting, or like he was like, I think this, and I was like, you are wrong. And like it's fun because that's where the passion and the joy comes from. And in my opinion, it is again making it something that people feel like they are listening in on a conversation between friends. And when we can, I think the best episodes have been when we come from with our own opinions, strong or however, and just meet up. However, if we've like done a recording and we do it again, we realize like that spark is a little bit dimmer because we've already had that conversation. We've already covered that territory. So we're kind of asking ourselves, what else can we say? So yeah.
I love that. Andrew, I know that before we started podcasting 3 years ago together, you had done a wonderful podcast called Lifestyle of a Gay Black Boy. And I was wondering if you could speak to how it began for you. Like, what were you feeling? How did you prep for it? Like, what was that like for you?
When I first started Lifestyle, I was in a bad spot. I was going through a really deep depression at that time, and just a lot of things had occurred in my life that I just wasn't happy about. I didn't know where I wanted to be for career-wise. I didn't want to live in the same place anymore. It was just kind of just this mucky feeling that I had. And it actually started with a conversation with my therapist who said, how about you just record? You don't like to write. You don't want to make a journal. So record yourself talking. And I just did it one day and I recorded myself talking. Then my best friend heard it and he was like, why don't you put this out here for people to hear? People need to hear that you're going through something and they can probably relate. And so I just did it. And then after I did it the first time, I did a second one and I was kind of like, oh, I like this. This is kind of fun. And then when I got the chance to just start talking about fuckboys, that was the thing that really just blossomed. That blossomed for me. And I was like, I'm here. This is what I want to do. This is fun.
I love that. I love that. You guys have been podcasting for almost 7 years, which is about the run of Boy Meets World. First of all, before I get to the question I was literally about to ask you, did you guys watch Boy Meets World during its original 1993 to 2000 run, or did you watch it when it was in reruns?
I watched it on the ground in real time. We were just talking about this. I watched it like I had VHS tapes where I would record live episodes to watch again. But then when it was in syndication and I lived in New York, it was I think it was like on ABC Family at the time. And I would watch it every morning right before I went to work. Like it would be on, put it on in the background. Me and my roommate at the time, she and I that was what like our morning routine. Boy Meets World in the background, getting ready for work in New York. So yeah, that was me. Tony?
Oh, same. I remember watching it in real time. I remember watching it, and they were like, next week on the series finale, and I'm like, where is this coming from? Like, I had no prep. I was freaking out. But yeah, I watched it through the reruns too. And what's interesting is that I remember when I first started watching the reruns, I remember feeling surprised to see them in syndication, because I was like, I didn't think anyone else cared about that show but me. Like, it wasn't a show I heard a lot of my friends talking about as much as like Urkel or like Full House or something like that. Like, there was other shows that I remember kids talking about more. I remember guys saying they had crushes on Topanga and things like that, but it was just never really brought up as much. And so to discover the fandom that it had then, you know, amongst people of color or just people in general, and now to be a part of this adult millennial community when we go to these live events and we have like in the full theater full of people who were obsessed with this show, it's just really interesting to see that it was a lot more popular than I think we knew, and even the cast themselves would say that they knew it was at the time.
So, I mean, it seems like all three of you are like pretty fantastic in like seeing the TGIF shows as it happened. Now, I was born in '91, so I was a little young to be catching Boy Meets World in its original run. I actually caught the Disney Channel reruns in the 2000s, so that was my experience doing that. In regards to the series finale thing, so they didn't like announce ahead of time that it was a series finale. Like, it was just a complete.
They did. I don't know if he was paying attention, but they did. And again, I say this because I like, it's so funny. I don't have like a lot of childhood memories, but I remember they said that it was the series finale. I had 1 2-hour tape that I got from the dollar store. I programmed my TV because my mom made me go to church that night. And I was like, this is the Boy Meets World finale. And I remember recording it at the first thing I did when we got back home from church was I ran to it, I watched it, and I think like the last little bit, it either like the recording had missed either a little bit of the beginning or a little bit of the end. I can't remember which one, but I do like, that's why I was like, oh no, they made it known because I made that appointment television. But I also was like one of those kids who like read TV Guide like it was a book. Like, I collected TV Guides as a kid.
Well, I definitely recorded it too. But what I mean by that is like, I think they only gave a heads up like the previous episode. It wasn't this thing where it was like, hey, this is our final season. Like with Seinfeld, you knew the finale was coming from the beginning of that season. Whereas with Boy Meets World, they gave us like a 2-week heads up or something like that. So that's what I mean, where it just really kind of like rocked my world.
You know, to your point, we know enough about the show and production where they may have found out 2 or 3 weeks before we did. Like, they were like, oh, by the way, this is it. It's wrapped up. Because Boy Meets World, the cast and everyone constantly talks about how they never knew if they would be renewed. And I think they even talk about there was a possibility of a season 8, but it was all dependent on Sabrina. And Sabrina made the move from ABC to the CW. And with that move, they were like, all right, well, let's wrap it up.
Yeah. And I think you meant the WB, the precursor.
Yeah, WB.
Yeah, to the CW. Andrew, have you ever had that passionate recording on VHS of whether it be Boy Meets World or Family Matters? You know, it's funny because I own a lot of VHS tapes from back in the day, but I've never actually like actively recorded anything on a blank videotape. So when I hear people, say they've recorded something on videotape, it just seems like this complicated science to me. Did you have any experience like that growing up, Andrew?
I did. Now, I had the VHS tapes where you take the little piece of electric tape and cover the little square on the back of the VHS tape and record over it. And I did it for Sailor Moon because I always loved Sailor Moon. My dad to this day will never let me live it down. I recorded over Set It Off, and he was so mad at me. He was so mad at me.
You recorded over Set It Off?
I did it. Don't get me wrong. I
Get
love
rid of the
Set It
whole
Off.
child.
I love Set It Off, but my dad was ready to fight me, but I didn't have any other tape to record Sailor Moon on. And to this day, he'll never let me live it down, ever.
And this is at a time when VHSs were like 1999. So like you owe him money. That's all I'm saying.
I pay him some money for it because I was like, Dad, I'm sorry. Now that I've seen Set It Off 100 times, I'm like, I get why you were mad.
Were you guys just like me when you saw Set It Off as a kid? Did you pretend in your house that you were the bank robber and you're doing the finger gun at everybody? I don't know if that ages well, but I love doing that after I watched Set It Off.
Tell me the procedure. Set It Off was my mother's favorite movie. I don't know why. She has 3 sisters, and I don't know if she saw herself reflected within the girls of the movie, but it was her favorite movie, and she used to watch it all the time. And I just remember growing up with it and knowing it backwards and forwards. And it still makes me cry. Like, it's still like one of the saddest movies. But you know what's amazing is when I went back and watched it, I was like, these performances are out of control. Like, they did not get the love or respect that they should have gotten, because everyone, Queen Latifah is phenomenal in that. Maybe her best role. So I just like going back, I'm like really taking it as an adult, and I'm like, wow, this movie is amazing. Like next level. Like with Heat, like I think it competes with that in terms of like a heist movie.
To your point, T, and I don't know, but like one of the things that I realize about Set It Off is that it is one of the very few movies where women are like owning their own, and it's almost like a revenge movie just based on the plot. And you don't like, I think a couple of years ago, we were like, why are Black people so into Kung Fu? And I asked my dad, and I did like all this research, and it turns out that it was like to see a non-white person fight a white person and win was a big deal. You don't get to see that. So to me, I think Set It Off, especially knowing the political time that we're dealing with in the mid 90s, to see 4 Black women be like, you know what? Fuck y'all. I'm taking money. And everyone's like, yes, this is what we need to be doing. And then for it to end the way it ends, you're like, that's the world we live in. I get it. But the idea that you even attempt it, I'm for you. Like, I don't see no faults.
Oh my
also,
God.
I am pushing for a stage musical adaptation of Set It Off. I don't know where you're at, Kenneth Babyface Edmonds, but me and you need to work on this.
We have been talking about this for years. We want to do a jukebox musical with 90s R&B because it needs to happen.
Either this one or Soul Food. One of the two. I want to see on stage.
Oh my God. Who would play Big Mama, though? Who would play Big Mama on Soul Food?
That's not as important as what song comes after Family Fucked My Husband. I need to know that.
Family Fucked My Husband is track 19 on the album.
Oh my God. All right. Getting back to your wonderful podcast, because we all know podcasting is hard work. It can be an exhausting grind. Has it been an enjoyable hobby for you guys with this podcast the last 7 years, or have there been a good number of moments where you just wanted to give in to the exhaustion of just, of pumping it out, as they say?
Definitely. I mean, speaking for myself, specifically during the pandemic, I remember just getting to the point where just like, I was just over like everything. I just didn't want to do it. Like nothing. It seemed really hard to find podcasting important during that time. And I remember feeling really hard to find the motivation to like put my all into this, especially during the beginning when it was really scary. So I just remember like you can see in like the dates of our recording that we had like large gaps during the pandemic, mostly because I just felt like it was a hard thing to focus on.
Yeah, I was going to say for me, it was way more of we took breaks, and like we talk about this all the time on our podcast. Like the reason why it should not have taken us 7 years to get through this show, but it did, because we would be like, yo, I'm not feeling it. I'm stopping. And, like that's not great in terms of like revenue in terms of podcasting. But at the time we were doing it for free. We were just doing it because it was a project we wanted to do. And so if it was something we needed to put down and walk away from, we did. And I think that for us, that was the right move. A, because it kind of let us have the timing that's really worked out for us. But B, it never became something that I was upset to do. Sometimes it became like something that was a hurdle to get over, but I always only recorded if we wanted to record.
That is very interesting that you say that, because I think it was, I can't remember if it was the season 3 or season 4 premiere recap that I listened from you guys. The one that came out in April 2020. And it was your first episode since the beginning of the pandemic. And I was getting the feeling from you guys that it's like, oh, pandemic, we have plenty of time on our hands. Let's get into it. It seemed like more of a positive experience. So it's interesting that you say that behind the scenes, it was sort of like, there's a lot more shit happening in the world. Mental health was on the decline, and reasonably, maybe podcasting is just not something that we want to do. Andrew, since you and I met much earlier on during the pandemic days, I think it was like early 2021, did you have those moments as well? Because, I mean, I met you from the jump and you were just a positive, bright, down person. So tell me about what your pandemic experience was like, and also podcasting.
Well, with podcasting in the pandemic, for me, working in a health clinic at the time and waiting for the vaccine, then finally getting the vaccine, and we were the first people to start distributing it here in New York, well, Rochester, where I am. It was different because I had seen people at their worst, but then it was hopeful because we had these vaccines that were trying to distribute to people and we're trying to do these things for the community and still trying to keep that work going. But without podcasting during that time, I don't think I would have been as sane as I was, or I would have actually handled it as much as I did, because it helped me build those connections and friendships outside of just seeing people sick at a clinic. So that helped me. The other side of it, the pandemic kind of made me realize that I talk to myself out loud in front of people, and that is not a good thing.
It's actually a really good thing. It is healthy. I'm sorry, I talk to myself out loud all the time, and I've done the research. People who talk to themselves out loud make better decisions. I didn't say they make good decisions. I said they make better decisions. So, and to your point, during the pandemic, I know that Tony had like his own journey during the pandemic, but I think we all remember, especially in the beginning, it was just amazing to be able to talk to someone else. It was just at the time he was my boyfriend, but now it's my husband. It was just the two of us. There was no one else. That was the only face I saw every day. And we would do Zoom parties with his friends. So like being able to talk to TC and check in on him and see how him and his family were doing were good because it reminded me of the world outside of my little bubble. And I think that's even why we continued to record, because it was like, even though it was a bit of a struggle, we knew that other people wanted some form of escape.
And as you were saying, like when the pandemic first started, initially we were like, oh, we have all this free time. Like we have all this opportunity. And I think just as the months kind of rolled on, as like specifically me, as like I had a few family members get COVID and get really sick. And, then George Floyd happened. Like there was just like compounding things that eventually it got to a point where I was like, hey, like, as Ceej was saying, like when we record, the thing that our listeners like is that we are excited to talk about what we're talking about. And if don't bring that excitement to the table for whatever reason, it's better to just like push pause and return back to it when we're good versus trying to push through it anyway.
Of course, I was going to ask this question. How did you come to the attention of Danielle, Ryder, Will, the Pod Meets World team? Because I think when they launched, I believe June 2022. So you guys were like 5-6 years into your run, something like that. So how did that relationship come about? Because I can only imagine what your response was when you hooked up with those guys.
So what happened is we had been recording. Even when we entered the space, we knew that we were one of the very few podcasts that had done Boy Meets World, and as we said, followed through. One of the things that Tony talks about is when we started, there were several Boy Meets World podcasts that had done like 1 or 2 seasons, and we were like, we are going to be the podcast that finishes. That is our goal. and since then, several other podcasts had sprung up, but we were already in our groove and we had our lane. And from my understanding, when they decided to do this, they just did a bunch of research. They listened to all of the podcasts that were out there. And this is one of the things that I think is really important. They listened to ours and they were like, you guys are doing something different. And to be fair, we listened to everyone else's too. And we were like, oh, I see what everyone has in common, but what no one was really doing was what TC and I did, which is like kind of making this a video essay about culture and about society. And like we talk about this all the time. If you have a show where a little white boy gets in trouble with the police and everything's good at the end of the day, is that the same lesson if that boy's color is 4 shades darker? And I think that our ability to look at that and be like, hey, yes, I like this show, but Corey's kind of being a dick is very different than people who would watch it and be like, I love it. I think there's no flaws. So anyway, we got on their radar, and we knew we were on their radar for several reasons. And I tell this story. I went and I told Tony, I was like, I think we can get on their show. I think we can. I'm going to write an email. And I kid you not, when I opened up my email to write an email, we had an email from them saying, hey, we've been listening. We like what you're doing. We would love for you to come on and be the voice of the fans. Time stopped. We couldn't believe like it had happened. But yeah, that was how we got on their radar. And I think that we took it very seriously when we did the first one, because we were like, if we do this right, who knows? And we did. They loved us. We had a really good, respectful conversation. And we were invited to come back at the end of every season. And we've just kind of been maintaining that relationship.
My God. So
can I add something to that real fast? Just, I think one important component, everything Ceej said I agree with, but I think another important component was the decision to switch from audio to video. It was a lot more work for us on our end to do video episodes, but what it did was it gave us content to then put on social media. Us having TikToks, I think actually had a huge part to play. Seeing the popularity of our TikToks, seeing the conversations we were having, I think also kind of let them know that there was a lane that they could go through. So I just, having that conversation internally to be like, hey, we should grow somehow is, I think, what kind of led ultimately to some of the larger conversations that ended up happening with the cast.
Wow. And I mean, it sounds like there was no hint of thinking like, oh my God, like, actual cast members from Boy Meets World will be recapping the show just as we have done for the past few years. That might take some of the shine and listeners away. I mean, it seems like you guys came from completely a place of just shock and awe and gratefulness, which I think is wonderful.
I didn't say that there was none of that. I'll say this. When we heard about it, of course, we existed. Lots of people were like, hey, did you know about this? We had hundreds of people be like, did you? Yes, we know about it. And when they premiered, at first, I didn't even listen to it because I was like, I don't want them to influence my opinions on the show. And even as I listen, they have influence. I think they've given me like an understanding of the behind the scenes, so I'm a little bit more forgiving than I was originally. But it's not that we were scared. I think that I knew our lane. And it's something that I've said to them, and I've said to TC since. There is one thing that they could never do that we do well, which is be two Black people watching the show. That was our lane. That was our approach. Our melanin point of view is how we came into this. Being a fan cast is how we came into this. And no matter who they are, no one in that cast, with the exception of Trina, can say we are a Black person watching this show from the outside in. And so I wasn't worried that they would take away our listeners. I saw it as an opportunity to gain more listeners. And in fact, the popularity of their show has only helped our show.
And just to add to that briefly, it's a mutually beneficial thing. Like, we've been able to gain listeners, but also like Boy Meets World kind of had like a little reputation of not being very
diverse.
Not white. Yeah, diverse. And so having us on kind of allows them to have these conversations that they don't typically have. There was all these, ideas about Trina and Ryder's relationship, their interracial relationship, what that was like on screen and off screen, and topics that when you hear them talk about it, it seems a little uncomfortable sometimes. But I think having us on there, we can kind of bring a little bit more honesty to the conversation and realism that I think they appreciate.
Anything surprising that you found as you got to know Danielle, Ryder, and Will through these appearances that you've guys have had on their podcast? Because I would imagine, I mean, and I absolutely enjoy your end of season recaps. I always wait for them. Anything you start to know about them that you didn't know previously that were just like, whoa, I didn't expect that from these kind of personalities?
I would say that I did not expect them to be listening to us, which is like, that's one of it. And then also how personable they are. Like, I think, like, if you listen to the very first season of their podcast, a lot of people are talking about how, it was you guys and then it was us, and we always felt on the outside. And in a way, they do have like a relationship between the three of them that feels very much like that's the three of them, and then we're all like guests at their party. However, they are very personable. Every time we've seen them, they're like, hey. And again, I'm just like, why? It feels very much like it's surprising in knowing other people in the industry. You don't always get someone who's open to actually making a connection in that way. So that would be what's surprising to me. Tony?
I think the big surprise was just how nice they were. Like, you may come to believe in Hollywood that everyone kind of has a performance aspect to them, but they're kind of the same people off the mic that they are on the mic. And, me and Ceej found ourselves in like the coolest experience ever going to their very first live taping, because they invited us to go backstage. And this was at a time when they weren't doing meet and greets afterwards. So we were there, and they just happened to have all of these other cast members, Mr. Turner, Amy Matthews, the guys who played the bullies like Frankie and Joey. They were
Lisa Loeb.
Yeah, it was just like this big party, and everyone was involved with Boy Meets World except for me and Ceej. And we found ourselves in this room, and we were just kind of watching and then having conversations with people. And I just truly could not believe how nice they were, and also the sweetness that existed amongst them as a cast. Like, I just truly felt like they were a family, but it wasn't like this, you guys can't be a part of this family. It felt like this family that they were so happy to like share and invite other people into.
And I gotta say, this must have been like the most recent end of season recap that I listened, where you guys were on the Pod Meets World podcast. I really wanted more of a conversation about, when you guys were asking about their touring experience, because I've heard so much from musicians, stand-ups about like the exhaustion, the grind that goes into touring. And when you met them, I mean, it sounds like that you still got that personable loveliness. You didn't get that sense of like, oh wow, these guys have put in a lot of work.
Well, I'll say, T and I talked about this. We saw it. Like we got there. They're tired, because we know what they look like, and we're familiar with them. So when we went to go visit them in Philadelphia, we were like, oh, they are spent. And to be fair, they had done like an additional 2 hours of meet and greet.
Yeah, they kind of overbooked their meet and greet, so they were there super late, past midnight.
Yeah, they were there. So we very much were just like, oh, we don't want to take up a lot of your time. You have a lot more people in line behind us. But what was surprising was that they were like, after we kept trying to leave, we kept being like, we're going to go like, and afterwards they were like, why were you guys rushing away? We were happy to see you. And
they were excited. Like Will's wife, Eric, who plays Eric, his wife came up to us and was happy to see us again. And I was like, this is so cool that you guys like know us and remember us and like look forward to seeing us. Like, that whole thing blew our mind. So I think, like Ceej said, we tried to keep a professional distance, but they were just happy to see some friendly faces that they recognized.
Yeah. And we have a guest who is a writer, or he was a writer on Girl Meets World, and he is very familiar with the writers of the cast, named Miles. And Miles also had like a very similar experience, where it's like he just showed up. It was the fact that he showed up and he was always there, that they were like, hey, we see you, we notice you. And I think that, to me, that's one of the biggest lessons, both in the podcast and building relationships in this way, is that like by showing up and being a personable person, to them, it only is reflected back. And that's been very enlightening and a positive.
I always want to know this about podcasters. How do you create a work-life balance? Because this is essentially a full-time job. And especially when you have an actual full-time job that pays a full-time salary, it can be a lot. So how do you guys figure out like, okay, this is time to dedicate to the podcast and this is time for self-care?
I mean, it's a juggle. And honestly, for me, there's no real consistency with it. I work from home, I work full time. And so if I have a day where I don't have a lot of meetings, I'll try to work on some editing or do some hours of editing. But, there's times where I'm like, hey, CJ, I didn't have time this week. We're going to get the episode like Sunday at like, 3 a.m. or something like that, or, down to the wire because like I just didn't have the time during the week to work on it. So, it's kind of a flow and just I try to make time ahead of time, but really with the, like you said, with the full-time job, it's hard.
Yeah. And for me, this is my full-time job. This is like, I'm very fortunate to be able to do this like totally, but I have a family. I have like all these other like really big life events that I'm taking care of. And I just like anything else with my ADHD, I had to learn how to carve out time and be like, all right, this is what this is for. I need everyone else to be aware that this is like what this is for. I don't have like a set recording space. I record and basically just kick my husband out of the house so I can do so. But being able to coordinate all of that and get everything in line, that's the only way. Managing it like I would anything else in my ADHD has been the key, because otherwise it just bleeds into everything. But then also, as we were saying with the recording, having boundaries and being like, hey, I can't do it. Yeah. Either I can't do it, I don't have time to do it. We can push it out. Again, I think consistency is really important when you're trying to grow. But if you are not given a paycheck to do it on a regular basis, remind yourself that it's free content for a lot of folks. And if it's free, then you can wait.
So, Ceej, you mentioned that this is your full-time job, podcasting, and I'm sure there's many a podcaster listening to this right now. They want to figure out, how do you get to that level where this can be a full-time monetization thing? Like, what was your journey to get to there?
Yes. First, marry a rich husband. That was my step one. And then step step two would have been, it took me forever, even with like financial security, to actually let go of this. I need to have a job. And there are even times where like I'm still dealing with it of like, oh, should I go out and be doing something differently? And for me, the monetization thing, we slept on a lot of money before we actually understood that we could get advertising and like the ability and where to find it and how to do it and merchandise. A lot of it was just like not understanding the value of what we could bring and underestimating ourselves. So one was not underestimating your own achievements, seeing what's out there, feeling like you have something that is worth monetizing. And then from there, I spend a lot of time, like with you guys is a perfect example of this. I spend a lot of time networking, finding other people to collaborate, finding other people to help us with our merchandise, finding other people who knows of different ad companies that we can work with. It is constantly a grind of putting myself out there and putting us out there in a way that values what we do. And for years, we just didn't do that, if I'm going to be honest.
Andrew, do you have anything to add in terms of like how you've been able to figure out a work-life balance with the podcasting that you've done for the past few years, and also have you had any thoughts, for monetization opportunities, or has it just been an enjoyable hobby for you?
Well, honestly, I relate to what you both have said. It's one of those things that when I first started recording, I didn't care who listened. I never looked at the analytics. I never looked at anything like where the money was or anything. I just was like, this is just for me to just get it out of me, so it's not just stuck inside. And I don't think I paid attention until one day I got an alert from an app that there was an opportunity for an ad. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know if I want to record an ad, because maybe I'll find out how many people actually listen and want to stop. So I was like, maybe one day I'll do it. And then I finally did it. And it was something that was encourageable for me. But I had to also check myself. I kind of had a conversation where, hey, I can make money off of this, but this isn't the money I need to sustain myself right now. So as much as I can put into it, I still have to make time for everything else in my life. And I had to do that by prioritizing what's going to be most important, getting back into school, that beast, and then working in a whole new field. It was something where I was just like, if I don't balance this, I'm going to have those moments where I just break and I don't know what to do. So that's when I took up camping as my hobby, because once I go camping, I have no service, no signal. There's nothing I can do. No matter how bad I feel like I should be recording something, I can't do it. And it was that time for a break. So I had to make that time to just reconnect with me, even though the podcast was about getting me out of me, if that makes sense. But I had to take that moment just to reconnect with nature and just say, this is one thing, this is one part of life, but money will be there no matter what I do.
I love that. I love that. All right, you guys are on season 7, right? Oh, yeah, go ahead. You want to add something?
I just wanted to quickly say that, if I think when we first started, if future us had told us like what our workload is now when we first started, we probably wouldn't have started. Yeah. I think the fact that we kind of baby stepped it, that we started off just an audio podcast and trying to get the structure and the audio part as good as we could, and then figuring out the video part, then from there figuring out social media, then from there figuring out ads and then merchandise. Like it was a progression that I think worked well, because if we had done all of it in the beginning, we probably would have been too overwhelmed. So just, in terms of people wanting to start and grow, like the whole thing is to grow. And that doesn't mean doing everything at once. It means, growing once you feel like you've mastered the steps of it all.
And to your point, you were talking about Andrew. Andrew just recorded for himself at first. And then someone was like, you can put this out. And I think that very similarly, we just got started. And that's one of the things that like, I'm in all these like forums and groups communities where people are like with podcasters, and it's like, just do it, in all honesty, because we did not start this anticipating the cast noticing us and giving us recognition. If anything, sometimes I look at it as like, oh, we really missed out on promoting ourselves or trying to put ourselves out there. But in reality, if you want to, start it, and you'll find which parts you like and which parts you don't like. I think TC and I we've had turns editing, we've had turns doing the socials, we've had turns like moving things around, but because of that, we also know that you don't have to do everything yourself. Find someone who you like working with and being like, hey, this is what I can do. This is what I can cover. If this is your strong suit, I'll let you handle this, and then just keep checking in with each other. Because I am a very big advocate of you should not be doing it all by yourself. Like, humans in general are communal, and people need people. And I really do feel that if you want to get started, just go ahead, put yourself in front of a mic, see how you like it. But if you find out that you don't like a certain part of it, find someone who does.
Is there anything that you both have discovered about yourselves doing this experience of podcasting?
That is a great question.
Yes. I mean, as we kind of mentioned, like we both, I think both of us got diagnosed with ADHD as we went through the podcast. And it's so interesting to hear, like, going back and listening to episodes where it's like, wow, I do interrupt a lot. I need to be careful about how I interrupt people when I talk, and like things like that, where it's like I'm listening to myself having an honest conversation and reviewing it subjectively in a way where I can kind of see like, oh, I do kind of rush ideas sometimes. Maybe I need to talk a little bit slower and things like that. So, learning those things about myself has been interesting.
I would say I learned how much I enjoy doing this. Like, there are so many other career paths that I have been in, and I did because I could do. And we were all talking about therapy. My therapist was like, my therapist for years has been trying to get me to just focus on this. And I was like, no, I gotta be doing other things. And when I now look at what brings me joy, I can work on this for hours because I enjoy it. I enjoy having conversations with people. I enjoy meeting new people. I enjoy the show that we're watching. So for me, it was learning how much joy this brings and how to listen to that joy instead of what I expect of myself.
You guys are on season 7, the final season of Boy Meets World. You're recapping that on your Bruh Meets World podcast. How are you feeling at this point? Are you feeling maybe a sense of relief that this chapter is coming to a close? Are you feeling sad because it's coming to a close? Like, what are your feelings as you are gradually getting to the finish line of recapping this show?
It's interesting because, yes, we're like in our final lap, but we're also now the most popular we've ever been. So it's very exciting. It's a very exciting time. We're able to get producers and writers onto our show that we just never had connections to before, either through the cast or from meeting people at strikes and things like that. So it's made the season really special for us. But I think I would be lying if I said that we're not excited to stop talking about Boy Meets World a little bit, or to just talk about something else, like it's 7 seasons. It's a long time.
And 7 years at that point. And to Tony's point, I think mostly what Tony said, it's like we've been with these characters and we're reaching the end, and there is a difference in quality from the beginning to the end of any show for the most part. And we're kind of seeing, like for me, I'm like, oh, even if they didn't know, it feels like they knew that they were like, we're not long for this. So I'm more excited to kind of, if I'm going to be honest and a little selfish, I'm excited for TC and I to finish something from beginning to end. That was the goal. Yeah. That was always the goal, and to kind of give myself that little gold star of you did it. You whether it was 7 years or 7 months, 7 seasons, whatever it may, or 7 episodes, you pushed yourself, you gave consistency, and you came out on the other end. And look what happens when you follow through. Like, that's how I'm feeling about season 7.
So you guys, obviously, I mean, I assume that you're listening to Pod Meets World to prepare for the end of the season recap. So I think right now they're on season 4. And as you're listening to them recap seasons that you yourself recapped years ago, what's that feeling like? Does it feel like, I don't know, does it just feel odd? Like, oh, wait, I forgot about that. We did that years ago. I mean, does it feel like sort of homework in a sense? Because, this is what you already do as a podcast. Like, what are your feelings as you are basically, rewinding the recap journey through these guys at Pod Meets World?
It's interesting. It's fun. I mean, at times it does feel like homework just because they release 2 hour-and-a-half episodes a week. So it's a lot to catch up on. Nonetheless, revisiting the original episode if we want to, or if we want to revisit our original episode to see how we felt about it, it can be a lot. And that's separate from just us doing our season 7 stuff, So it is a lot of content. But one of the things that I think is really fascinating that we've been talking about is they're on season 4 right now, and they're talking about episodes that we were a little harsh on. And now that we're in season 7, we're like, you know what? We were a little too hard on those episodes. Those were great episodes, because now we're at the end and we're like, wow, it didn't get better than that. So we kind of see it differently. And so it has kind of like, I think, made us realize our original critiques may have been a little too harsh or too rushed at first.
I was very, very much like he said, if there are certain weeks where I watch our episode, I record our episode, I then listen to their episode, then I listen to my episode I listen to our episode of the episode that they just covered. Then I go into all the forums to look at what everyone's saying about all of it. And again, if each one of those is an hour, which they're not, they're all more, that's 5 hours. And it can be a lot. And that's per episode. That's like not even including the fact that, as T said, they have 2 episodes a week. But also, I think that they talked about it before on their podcast on how like it's Inception. It's like you're listening to the podcast of the show of the podcast, and it's just kind of like layers on layers. For me right now, I feel as if it has been interesting to see my takes because there have been certain times where I will be like, oh, they're getting to an episode we love. And then I listen to our episode. I was like, oh, we did not like that episode. and I don't disagree with everything that I said, but it is interesting to me to see how memories are formed. And it's like, oh, even though I covered that episode, I still, doesn't matter what I said about it when we recorded, I still think that episode is good. I still hold that episode close to my heart. And it still has its problems, but you can have both. And I think that that's what's really important. And that's one of the things that we're always talking about to them and to our listeners is that we critique this show, but we also enjoy this show. And I think that sometimes people think that if you're critiquing something, you don't like it. And it's like, in my mind, it's not that we don't like it, it's that we want better.
So I think the Pop Meets World episode, they recently mentioned that Boy Meets World now, I think it's going to be rerun on the Freeform network now. I think it's going to be like on in the middle of the day.
Yep.
Because you guys have recapped this podcast for almost 7 years, because you're working with Pod Meets World to revisit the recaps, can you just watch a Boy Meets World episode casually without having that critic thing in your head, like, oh, this and that? Like, I just wonder how recapping Boy Meets World for all this time has affected your experience as a casual viewer.
Do we watch it casually anymore? Have you watched it casually since we started the podcast? Because I feel like we're only watching it for work for the most part, right?
No. Here's the thing. I'll say this. I watched Living Single yesterday. I was watching episodes and I was having fun and I'm laughing at the jokes, but I also am like looking at the stage setup. I'm like, oh, this is a new set. This is a swing set. And I think for me right now, it's a balance. There are moments when I'm watching Boy Meets World and I'm so caught up, I've stopped taking notes. And I realized that I stopped taking notes because I got caught up in the story. And then there are also times where I'm taking notes and I'm more like, wait, is this an inconsistency? Is this something that we've discussed before? Do I feel like this lesson is one I want to walk away from and teach others? Like, for me, it's a balancing act. I can watch it and still be a fan, but I think that if anything, I've learned the work that goes into making television. So I can watch it as a fan, but also watch it as someone who now understands how the sausage is made and either love it more for that or just notice that, all right, y'all didn't put in as much effort as y'all could have.
The holiday episodes I always revisit, like the Christmas episodes, the Halloween episodes. Those are probably the ones I watch as a fan of the show every year.
Andrew, I'm sorry. Do you have any more questions for these guys?
I do. I really do. So I was just listening to your episode where you guys had just seen Black Panther in theaters in my car. And I was hysterically screaming and almost drove into traffic oncoming to me because I was laughing so much. Are you guys ever going to record a recap of just Black Panther, both movies?
We should. That's actually really great. So it's so funny that you say that because one of the things as we come to the close of our season 7, even the cast, they were like, what do you guys want to do? And again, they asked us this like a year ago. They were like, what do you want to do next? And we were like, oh, next? That's a good question. Yeah. So we have been, I guess we can like say this here. We have been workshopping several projects that allow us to expand outside of Boy Meets World. And I think that a double feature of both Black Panthers only makes sense because there is something about when we see us, like there is something about that. And if you've listened to us at all, Tony and I can come. And when we are aligned on something or when we enjoy it, there is no better feeling. There is no other conversation. It's a party on the line, and I definitely see a future in which that happened.
I would also say I would be very interested to hear what we originally said because I feel like my thoughts of Black Panther have changed since its original release.
Know better, do better. That's how I feel.
I love that. It's amazing. I will listen right away if y'all post this, if it makes the thing, if you make it happen, please tell me. Because I screamed in my car just listening. I'm like, these are other Black people who saw this movie. And finally, I just get to hear other opinions on it. I loved it.
Yeah. And again, by the way, that's kind of like our whole thing is like being that voice of, hey, this is the thing that I know other Black people have seen, yet I haven't heard other Black people talk about it. So I'm going to talk about it. and I mean, I think that's what you guys are doing with Family Matters. Like there's this idea of, I'll never forget. It's a show on Netflix called Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. And there comes a point in time where this character is talking, it's a white character talking to a Black desk worker. And she goes, yeah, we're kind of like the Kyle and Max of our office. And the white character goes, what? She goes, oh, so we supposed to watch all y'all shows, but you can't watch none of ours? And I was like, yes, that whoever wrote that line was like, yes, instead of being like, we're the Ross and Rachel or whatever, I'm going to reference a Black show because I know what Black people are watching and we have our own shared language. And I feel like there needs to be more of that. There needs to be more coming together and being like, hey, we all watch Sister Sister, which is why Go Home Roger hits in a way that if you weren't there, you weren't there. But if you were, you get it. And as millennials themselves start to do their own nostalgia watches, I feel like Black people deserve just as much of a voice.
Y'all have blown my mind just sitting here listening. John, you've answered and asked so many things that I want to know. So I this is amazing, y'all.
Andrew and I, I think we're on, last night we recorded season 1, episode 10 of Family Matters. So we are in the beginning of this journey. And I think kind of like you guys, it's this balance of like, oh man, we have so much fun watching this, but also holy fucking shit, it's 9 seasons. I think we're going to be dedicating a decade of our lives doing this because, work-life balance. I mean, I've already talked about how much I cannot wait to get to the end of season 1 just for that break before we can refresh for season 2. Because with my large ass font and all the other details that I add, I think I had like a 46-page recap for season 1, episode 10. So it's work. It's work. So maybe you guys already kind of said it throughout the interview, but for TGIF rewatch podcasters like us who are just starting out, like just give us the Jesus speech. Like what should we do? What's going to be the best thing for us to sustain this throughout? Because we want to keep it fun.
Okay, I have 2 things.
Yeah.
First thing I would say is like, this is my hobby. Like, this is what I do outside of work. So like in the same way of like meeting guys for poker every week or like, going to play tennis once a week or whatever hobbies that people have, like this is my hobby. So if I treat it like it's not this like, oh, we have to get through 7 seasons. It's just like, no, on Tuesdays we do this. And just kind of make it more of like in line with my schedule. It kind of makes it seem less like a job and more like something I get to do. And that's the second thing is like keeping your attitude right. Like, I mean, working with Ceej, like it's important that like we have a good relationship, through the podcast and we have to, work with each other. And, he has to call me out when I forget shit and I have to call him out when he does shit. And like, we have to kind of work through our shit to make it so that this can be fun for us, because when it stops being fun, it stops being worth doing. Like, and you can probably hear it. Like the thing about podcasting is it is performance. We invite people on our podcasts sometimes and we're just like, wow, like they did not have the personality. They did not have that zest. They couldn't just like talk to us, and like talking and being able to talk about something with passion is kind of a talent. And so you have to make sure that you stay passionate about it, because otherwise you're going to lose your flair. And if you're not excited to talk about it, no one's going to be excited to listen to it.
Yeah. It's so funny. I was going to follow up exactly with what Tony said, which is that I did not look at this as like, oh, we have 7 seasons to get through. I was like, I have next week's episode to get through. I honestly am not like, the other day we were recording and Tony was like, oh, you know what next episode is? And I was like, no, I don't, because I don't know that is what the next episode will be. And that's kind of like how I look at it, is every week I know what the next episode is, but I can't tell you when, even though I have a calendar and I can calculate when the final episode should be. I can't guarantee that that's when we will hit that milestone. So instead, I can tell you that I plan to show up next week, having watched the episode, coming ready to give my opinions. And that's That's the only way that I look at it, because otherwise you can get overwhelmed. You're talking about 9 seasons. If someone told me right now, hey, you're going to do 9 seasons of something, I'd be like, nope. But if you told me next week we're going to be doing this and you get to talk with friends and you get to have fun and this is the upcoming plot, and I'll be like, oh, that sounds fun. I want to do that.
So I know you have a heart out right now, TC. Up to you guys. If you have time to give all your plugs, because I want people to find you.
People, you can reach out to us at brummeetsworld@gmail.com. You can see us on all of the platforms, all the social platforms at Bruh Meets World, YouTube at Bruh Meets World Pod, and
we also have some really fun merch if you guys want to support us. We have some cool hoodies and things like that, even if you're not super into Boy Meets World, I think you might enjoy some of our merchandise.
Yeah. Love it. Well, hey, thank you so much. It was so nice to meet you. And we hopefully we'll keep in touch with you.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much. Have a good one, guys.
It's so nice meeting you.
I mean, Bruh Meets World, Ceej and TC. I mean, what I will say is they were exactly as personable and friendly and in-depth and just wonderful as I had hoped they would be, just from listening to their podcast and listening to their appearances on Pod Meets World. What do you think, Andrew?
I enjoyed them thoroughly. Listening to them on their podcast and then listening and talking to them in this setting, that energy is real. Like, I was listening to Bruh Meets World and just laughing and having a good time. I felt like I was talking with like my cousins about a TV show that we all used to watch together. And then to talk with them in this setting, it's the same just positive energy that just felt good. So this was so great. I feel all encouraged now.
Yeah, absolutely. So follow them, keep up with them and their wonderful content. Hopefully you could do the same for us, the Delicious Recap Family Matters. Subscribe, rate, review wherever you find your podcast. The Delicious Recap at gmail.com is where you could send questions, comments, concerns, feedback. If you have anything to share about this interview, that would be awesome. We'd love to hear from you. And we're on social media at Family Matters Rewatch Pod, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, YouTube. Andrew, I think you should sign us out.
I'm just going to go ahead and say it. We've got to let the deliciousness reign for this one.